It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
What's up? What's happening? Welcome in. It is the Take Command podcast. I will resist the urge, Logan Paulsen, as I am Craig Hoffman, to say, oh, we are now 13 seconds in and we have made it longer than the game went really well the other night for the Commanders. Oh, man, that was rough. The opening kickoff return for a touchdown. It didn't get much better from there, and all snarkiness and such aside, obviously. There's a lot to chew on, I think, from this game. So that's what we're going to do. It's mostly a game review. Logan has been at practice the last couple of days as well since the game, so we will be able to weave in maybe a couple of things that have happened. And also, we are recording this just before 11 a.m. on Monday, so we are about an hour after the roster announcements. The roster moves were announced, including Dominique Hampton being let go. So we can touch on all of that as we go, Logan. But like, you're on the sideline doing the radio call the other night, and you know it starts like it starts with a Travion Henderson touchdown. Like, what are you doing on the sideline besides going, oh no?
Well, it's interesting because, like, you know, I really get excited for the preseason because it's great opportunities for guys.
Yeah.
It's guys like making moves and, you know, making plays and making careers, really. And so prior to kickoff, I'm like, this is it. Who's going to make the first tackle? Who's going to do this stuff for this team? And obviously it doesn't go the way you want. And I think providing context on some of that stuff is important, you know, like,
For sure.
I think on the radio broadcast, that was a big part of like Fletch, Bram, our approach to that play. And I think it's just important to remember you got a lot of young guys out there, you know, like, and watching the all-22 back. I don't usually watch special teams, but obviously I watched all the special teams plays. You know, you realize that there's some guys that haven't covered a lot of kicks in the NFL. It's a new format. You know, they haven't really done it like this. And so getting people in the right positions, getting the right feel, getting that kind of interplay of positions is going to be an important part of their learning process. And so the coach in me says, like, yeah, that's terrible, but I do think there's a lot of good teaching when you buzz through the tape. And it's not for lack of effort in most cases. It's for lack of just general football understanding. And that's part of the deal when you're playing a lot of young guys.
No, for sure. And I feel really bad for some of those guys out there because like this is an opportunity. And like, you know, for Dom Hampton, like this was a huge opportunity for him, and it obviously went as badly as it could and the results were as bad as it could, but like that's real life. Now, will a guy who's a 5th round pick last year probably get picked up somewhere else? And, you know, will he at the very least have a chance to be on a practice squad this year? Probably, but that's like very different than, and it's got to be jarring compared to where his head was probably on Friday, like going into the game. He's like, this is my chance to like solidify myself as a guy who's trying to fight for snaps during the regular season on this team and trying to carve out a role for myself. And then all of a sudden you're gone. And I actually talked about this on the radio show on Friday. I was like, there are some guys that for them tonight, the reality is this could be their last NFL game. And that is a really harsh reality of the NFL, of pro sports. And like, I don't want to be flippant about that, but also, you know, and also we have to take a look at, you know, what this means for the team moving forward. And my question would be like, does it mean anything? I'm sure this hits you extra hard as a guy who played in a ton of preseason games and always felt like you were on the edge of the roster. And like, there's a very human, like, individual player side to this.
Sure.
But when you if you take that, try as best you can to take that hat off for a second and put your analyst hat on, more so I guess your coach hat, like, does the sloppiness, the poor play, and ultimately the final score mean anything for this team moving forward, considering 30 guys that are going to be on the team in 2 weeks didn't even suit up?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a canary in a coal mine. And what I mean by that is I don't think this is a big deal. I really don't.
Yeah.
I think when you have 30 guys that have played a lot of NFL football not playing in this game, you're going to have results that look like this. But I think as a coach and as a former player, right, when you're in these situations and you have a game like that, you kind of got to say, like, what is my process like? Am I actually getting ready to play football games? And as a coach, am I getting these young guys ready to play football games? And is there something in practice that we're not emphasizing? We're not giving these guys enough opportunities. That's the other thing, man. Like, you know, when I think back to my rookie year, my second year, my third year, I was the 3rd or 4th guy. And so you're only getting 5 reps in a practice. And so a lot of these guys come from environments where they're playing a lot in college. They get a lot of reps. They are they are kind of forced to know the information. But when you're a backup in the NFL, man, you got to prepare in a certain way. And so I do think, when people say, oh, like for example, like they want to bring in a veteran linebacker, for example, it's not because they think the veteran linebacker is a better athlete or going to have a larger impact. It's just a good model in the room of like what it means to be a 3. Because like, you look at Bobby Wagner, he started his whole career. Frankie Lou was started for the majority of his career. And so now having someone in the back of the room that says, hey man, like no one's going to hold your hand to this point. Like you have to know how to do these different things. I think is really what I take out of it. So is there a little bit of a, like a developmental, like, are we giving these guys enough of this kind of information? Maybe, but does it mean anything for week 1? No, not really. Does it mean stuff like you said for the interpersonal relationships and who's going to make the roster? Absolutely. But in terms of wins, losses, I don't really think this is that significant, especially because like we'll talk about this in more detail in a second. The Patriots handled this game in a certain way. And the Commanders handled it in a completely different way. And I think that also led to some of the issues specifically on defense.
Yeah, I think that when you have another team play their starters, which I was like, wait, what's Drake made? Like they just had joint practice. And I didn't realize the Patriots were gonna, maybe that's on me. I just didn't follow enough Patriots media during the week outside of like their observations of what happened in the joint practice for the Commanders. But I wasn't paying attention to like, hey, Vrabes, who's gonna play on Friday?
Right.
It's starters versus like third stringers. And I think there's a great point that John Keim made on his show, which is, if you have like one, this doesn't mean all these guys are bad football players, right? If you have one or two of these guys mixed in with starters, then like they can be a part of the system. And maybe they're the weakest link, but you can game plan around that. You're not even game planning. You have other guys that can cover. But because everyone is overexposed, because it's all second and third stringers, then with a guy that should be the worst, in air quotes, guy on the field becomes like the best guy on the field, and they're facing a real starting offense. I think outside of Stephon Diggs, basically everybody played for New England.
And Morgan Moses, the right tackle.
Yeah,
but it's their swing player. He's playing too. Like he'll play minutes for them this year, significant minutes.
So it's like 9.5 starters versus 0. Yeah. And that went about how, I guess, one, Trey Amos is out there. Newton's a rotation player. But like that's how that's going to go. Yeah. But I think the thing that Quinn was so upset by that is legit, and in some ways might be a blessing in disguise for a wake-up call, was like, hey guys, just because we were good last year and now you're wearing the same jersey doesn't mean you get to show up and win football games. Like there's a way to, I'm going to borrow Dan's language here. There's a way we have to get down if we want the results that we want. And very clearly they did not do that.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too, is like, they actually kind of like game planned this team a little bit, like there was a couple runs like from the Baltimore game last year, that kind of short motion out of 22 personnel to crack, then the receiver cracks the next guy. You pull the play side guard and the fullback to the perimeter. They ran that a bunch. And I think the other thing, so people are like, okay, well, they should know.
Was that the ones they got the touchdown on down in the red zone like 3 times? And it's
they
like
got a touchdown.
Yeah, this play clearly works.
They got a touchdown. Trey Hendrickson had 2 explosive runs on it, right? They were both to the left. And so people say, well, why didn't they get it fixed? Well, the problem is like you have, for example, you have on the first play, you have your first defensive end. I forget who it was, but whoever
Cleveland.
It is. And then you have, Kane Madrano as linebacker and Tyler Owens as your safety. Then you get all the way to the third quarter when they score that touchdown, and all of a sudden it's Daniels is the safety, Arnold is the linebacker, Jones is the defensive end. And so like those guys didn't get that rep. And some of the stuff that happens over the course of a normal game, you say, oh, I've seen this motion. I've seen this play. I've seen this blocking surface. These guys are now seeing it for the first time. And I think that's another element that is, upon review, I think that group deserves a little bit of empathy. Like even the draw that they ran, like, the Commanders, we don't run a lot of draws in practice. We don't run a lot of crack pull stuff out of 22 personnel. That changes your fits a little bit. So if it's something you're not super exposed to, you're going to have a hard time fitting some of those runs, and you're going to get explosive plays. And so that's another element of the preseason that I think is just important to acknowledge, is just like, hey, they took it a little bit more seriously. Not that we didn't take it seriously. I hate that language. Like they prepped it more. Like we were out there, we ran man coverage. We ran a little bit of cover 2. That's our base defense. We didn't coach, hey, this is how we play our man coverage versus this crack look. We didn't coach how this is how we fit this run versus cover 2. Even some of their backfield action stuff was a little bit novel. And you could tell, like, Kane Medrano is a great example. Like, I think in general, he had a energetic, physical game. You saw the upside of what he is. But you see a young player, right? You see a duo action where the back takes counter steps. He mirrors the back, runs right into the double team. Like, that's something he's seen in college. That's something he's going to do. I'm pretty confident they didn't talk him through, hey, if you get counter steps by the back on duo this week, like, this is how we're going to fit it. That's just not how you prep these games, having played in a lot of them, right? It's just not what you do. So I think just understanding the general context of why this looks the way it did defensively is important. And again, remembering that people are changing, people are getting reps. This is the first time some of these guys have gotten those looks in practice or whatever. And that's why you do these joint practices. That's why you do these preseason games. So just another kind of add-on to what you're talking about there.
Right. And to just, put a period and to underline the point here, like, during the regular season, you will do all that stuff. It's like, they like to do this, so we are going to prepare for it. And when you see it, you respond by this thing, not the thing that we practiced in the summer when this little wrinkle wasn't in there. Like, you anticipate the wrinkle, and that allows you to do what you need to do. Like, so much of football, like, we talk about it all the time. So much of football happens pre-snap. Like, you got to understand what's coming at you, and then you go from there. All right. So with that said, we're going to go position by position, kind of like we did in the preview through the review. And so everyone will get a little bit of attention. But special teams wise, anything else you want to add on? Because obviously it was a tremendously poor results performance. Anything else on the special teams front before we get to the offense and defense of it all?
Yeah, I think if you just want like a kind of a quick breakdown of the touchdown, basically you get Kane, and I forget the other person that he's working with, but the fives in this system, the L and R fives, so the kind of interior guys on the kickoff coverage, so the guys right near the kicker have a little bit of flexibility. The 4 tends to be a penetrator, and then the 5 kind of plays off. So think about your
just in case anyone didn't pick this up, 5 is the guy closest to the kicker. There's 11 guys on the field. The kicker is like 0, and then you have 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 to the sidelines.
All the way out. And so the 4 is the guy that's going to penetrate the kickoff. So think about your Tyler Owens has kind of done that for us, right? He's going to penetrate, and then your Revo is going to kind of play off Tyler Owens and fit the run. And so watching it, like in this game, Kane Medrano's the 5, and the penetrator kind of punches up the field. And Revo, if he's in the game, would do a great job of saying, oh, he's getting washed down. I'm just going to play over top of this, and he'd be in perfect position to make the tackle. But you get a young player who tries to play over the top. You get 2 guys in the gap, and then obviously people get manned up on the outside, which happens on kickoff return, and they hit it up for a touchdown. And again, they are playing their starting kickoff return team, and people forget, like, oh, it's special teams, they're all backups. No, like, imagine if we had Revo in on this play. Imagine if we had T.O. in on this play. It's going to feel a little different from an energy, physicality. Nick Ballore, if he's in the game, like, what does that look like? So just again, another moment where you're getting guys, and that's where I say this is good learning. Because now I can go to Kane and be like, hey, we talked about this in practice this week. This is how it's going to feel if it plays like this. Right. And so those reps are invaluable. And I think it's just guys getting more reps, more familiar, and young guys make young mistakes, and I've been that guy before. I've made those mistakes, and hopefully they'll have an opportunity to learn from them.
For sure. And I also think Yankoff was held in the hole, which doesn't help.
Yeah, that did happen also. He was the R3, right? Yeah. So
and he's trying to get there and make the tackle, and you just see the jersey go rump, and it's like, hey, that seems like an important. Yeah, it seems like an important one. Can we maybe throw? By the way, I will say I will not be too just Commanders telecast. Can we replace, I'm not saying you can't take Clark Construction's money, but you can't have a yellow logo in the place where the flag is on the graphic. That's something you were probably not aware of.
So it's funny. I was driving to the airport with my boss who kind of does graphics. He goes, yeah, I didn't even think about that. So we're fixing that for the next one. Like they've already
excellent. I'm now glad that I brought it up.
Yeah.
I'm now glad that I brought it up. Yeah. Cause every play I was like, is there a flag? Nope. That's just the Clark logo. There's a flag. Nope. That's a Clark logo. Okay. We're here to report first.
They take feedback too. They make it happen. They'll make it better.
Look at those Commanders. They're just a responsive bunch. All right, let's get into. We'll start with the offense. Quarterbacks next on tape. Take Command Podcast. Logan Paulsen there. Craig Hoffman here. Let's dive into the offense from the Commanders matchup with the New England Patriots on Friday night. So unlike a regular season where we kind of just go like, what is the most interesting thing? Because it's training camp and the position battles and the whole deal. I think it's better for us, Logan, to just go kind of position by position and say, hey, here's the evaluation. Obviously some, including the quarterbacks, wide receivers we're going to start, are going to merge together, which actually brings me to my thoughts on Sam Hartman. If I could start there.
Sure.
I think he was better than the narrative says, because like, how different do his numbers look and how much better is he able to potentially get into a rhythm and be more productive if some of the drops that happen aren't dropped? Chris Moore's got a couple. There's one to Sinnott that, like, I don't know. As a receiver, I'm sure you'd be like, you got to catch that. Or like, I would have to catch that because if it was me, but also it was probably a bad ball. It's behind him. Like, both guys could have done better. I just think that like there's a lot of yardage out there and throws made by Sam Hartman that his day looks a lot different if the receiver just catches the football. That said, it's not like he was awesome. The interception's really, really bad. And I do think Josh Johnson was better. I just don't think that like Sam Hartman was total dumpster fire the way that like the numbers and it maybe felt in the moment, because it just, between the kickoff return and like the way things spiraled, it felt very helpless.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because I actually, upon review, thought he was making the right decisions, if that makes sense. Like, I thought the ball was going where it should go. Like, the first ball that he misses to Osborne, like, they're getting a edge pressure, ball over the top. That's where the ball should go. The throw's errant. Or that's the other thing that's hard to tell with some of this stuff is, like, was Osborne supposed to be attacking that a little bit more downhill?
Right.
Wasn't sure. There's one to Sinnott later where Sinnott actually runs a pretty good route, but kind of throttles coming out. And I'm like, Zach Ertz is going to run through this zone. That ball is going to be on time. And that's probably a catch. So good route by Sinnott. But again, there's like a little bit of inexperience in terms of like run through that zone. That ball's leading you. You catch that thing running. And you might, I'm not saying you're going to score, but that's an explosive play. You mentioned the drop to Moore. Like that was the perfect read. Like perfect read. Great job on that dig. Like the dig was just like a stone-handed drop. And again, like great route by him, great setup, working the progression, and the feet took him to the right spot. Bad drop. There's the explosive play down the sideline, which again was a tougher catch in terms of taking that to completion. But then I think people forget about this too. There was a ball to KJ Osborne on a box fade that he couldn't have handed to KJ in a better spot.
Yes.
And he dropped it. So I thought his process was actually pretty good. And even on the interception, like I went back and watched a couple times, and I'm sure Sam would say that he'd want that throw back, but the receiver does slip. And so it takes it from a contested catch to like a straight out interception. And I think those are the things that over the course of the game, they feel really icky. And I'm not trying to make an excuse for him. I'm not. I'm just saying like when you watch enough football, like those things matter. And like I'm really glad you brought up the rhythm element of it too. Like if you get a couple of those explosive chunks, like the one to Sinnott, whose fault is that really? Who knows? Probably could be a better ball, but that's an explosive play. The one to Moore is an explosive play. The second one to Moore is an explosive play. The one to Osborne's a touchdown. Like I come out of this saying like, man, that's like not a bad day at the office if you complete some of those balls, and some of those they should be completed. That's the other thing.
Right.
And
it's a confidence too, right? Like that third down to Moore, the first one, the dig is like a 3rd and long, and you go out and you drill a 3rd and long. It's like, all right, got our first down. Let's keep going on this drive. Feel confident, feel in rhythm. And instead it's like,
and drill a 3rd long that he could run with. Like that was the other thing. That ball placement was perfect.
Yeah.
And like maybe that's a 15-yard gain of catching, but it's like he could run with that. And so you look at some of these, you're like, man, like that could have been a much different day for him if some of these are locked in. Now, you know, some of his throwing mechanics are a tick off. Like I'm not saying it's everybody else's fault. Like he can definitely be better. But I upon rewatching it, I was kind of like, oh, like this is not as bad as like you said, the narrative would indicate upon rewatching.
Yeah, or that it felt. It definitely was not as bad as it felt. You know, again, quoting the person who knows more than I do, John Keim. He did a good job of mentioning on his show too. Sam had shoulder surgery in the offseason, and you wonder like some of the accuracy stuff, and like you don't get to put a point on the board and be like, but I made the right decision. Like you have to execute the throw. Right. But I tend to agree with you that watching it back, you're like, I feel like the decision making is pretty good, but you got to be able to make the throws, the arm strength to, zip that ball to the outside. So, he's a little late, receiver stumbles, and he doesn't have the strongest arm. Like that's begging to be picked on the interception. So there's definitely stuff there, accuracy wise and occasionally decision making wise, footwork wise, all that stuff for Hartman. What about for Johnson? Because it definitely, like the offense felt crisper Also, New England stopped playing their starters, which was helpful.
Yeah.
So it was much more of an even fight, and especially for a guy that's played as much football as Josh Johnson. What did you make of him? Because I do think right now having that veteran presence feels like the more important thing, and they can probably get both of them to the practice. Hopefully, they can get both of them to the practice squad. But if they had to choose, I do feel like Johnson, for everything we just said about Hartman, Johnson probably pulls himself ahead with this performance.
Yeah, and I think, Johnson's still learning some of the offense, kind of like reads, footwork. But overall, I think, he's played a lot of ball, man. And that's kind of how it looked like. He understands what an NFL window is. He understands what NFL open is. He understands kind of where the ball needs to be. And again, there are some athletic and physical limitations with Josh Johnson that I'm sure he would also admit to having in terms of arm strength.
Yeah, being 38 years old,
Yeah.
that's an athletic limitation.
For everybody, right? But yeah, so I'd say like overall, it's kind of what you'd expect from a veteran, like who's playing late in a preseason game with, a bunch of guys who a bunch of receivers who may or may not make the roster. Like I think the offensive line on the whole on the day actually played pretty good, and there's some things here and there that got to get cleaned up. But in terms of what he did, like that's kind of my expectation for him. Like, and I think he made the throws he needed to. He got a little lucky on some stuff, and overall, I think you feel pretty good about the performance if you're him.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so when you get to then the wide receivers, this is the yikes.
Yeah.
Luke didn't really do a whole lot. Dalen Lane didn't really do a whole lot. A couple guys like Tay Martin, you're like, oh, who are you wearing number 6 running around? Did a couple nice things. Chris Moore, the drops, like that's brutal. That's not going to work. I think it obviously reinforces the importance of Terry and of Noah and of Debo. And I guess if there's any solace I take, it's like this time last year, Noah Brown was a Houston Texan. And so if I had to guess right here, here's my bold hot take of the show, Logan. If I had to guess, wide receiver 6 is not currently on the roster if they keep 6. Like I think that there's probably going to be someone somewhere that they feel like they can bring in and do something. But it was a concern. The concern was validated. Not good.
Yeah. And I think, Moore is probably the closest from like a route running standpoint. But again, like if you look at this game and you look at the last 2 weeks of training camp, like he's had some issues. And, like I think he had a really good OTA minicamp period. So maybe you're saying he's just got a little bit of the yips and he'll get back in the swing of things here shortly. But that's not really what, like over the last couple of days, this is what he's been. So again, the route running's there, the nuance there, the experience is there. But yeah, that's been tough. I think Lane, I like what Lane did. I think there's a lot of playmaker to him. I like what he did with the ball in his hand as a returner. I like how aggressive he was. He made a tackle on teams. So I think his day is probably better than people think maybe. You know what I mean? Like in terms of offensive production, I think he had a very solid day in terms of his game. But yeah, in terms of receivers, like you didn't really feel Luke. You didn't really feel Strawn, the big, tall receiver. You didn't really feel that guy. You felt a couple of those down the rosters guy. Brooks and the other guy, number 10, the UDFA, I thought had a solid day. Jacoby Jones.
Yeah, I feel like Brooks was probably the best of the bunch. Like he popped a couple of times. You're like, okay, 16, doing something.
Right, but again, like he's working against the back half of the roster guys. So that's what you'd expect, right? I don't think you're saying, these guys now need to be the 5th and 6th wide receiver. And I think that's the thing coming out, like you said, is, who's going to play that spot for this team? Like, and I think it's going to be somebody who's cut, possible trade candidate, whatever that looks like. But I do believe, like, unless they start showing some more life here, like that's what this is going to be. It's going to be like, we got to we got to make the room a little bit more talented. And I hate saying that because, again, like that means that someone here who's built relationships and a home here is going to have to find a new spot. But unfortunately, that's the nature of the biz in the NFL.
Yeah, and it's kind of crazy because I feel bad, like, because we were telling everybody in the spring, like, man, they got like 8, 9 guys that like look pretty good, and they did.
And nobody
but spring is
really
different than
that through.
Yeah, they're just, guys like use Chris Moore. Like Chris Moore was a stud in the spring. Like it doesn't do you much good because it's the spring. Like he hasn't been good in camp, and then obviously you see what he is in the game. Luke looked so much better. Like he flashed so well in the spring, and it's been more inconsistent in camp. And it's just, you don't want the closer it gets to real football for the worse it to look, but that has kind of been the reality of the situation. So I then think it's interesting that they don't bring in any receivers They had like 25 guys that tried out, a couple, like 6-7 linebackers. Clearly that was an emphasis. Some corners they wound up signing to. So like they did the thing that NFL teams do. They churn the bottom of the roster, but none at the receiver position. So I do wonder if there's something they know, or there's situations they're watching. They just kind of know eventually someone's going to get cut somewhere else. Maybe they like Brooks enough, or one of their other guys enough. Or maybe they're just looking at the roster and, Adam, this time of year is going to do the same thing every other GM we've ever seen on Hard Knocks. There's a whiteboard somewhere in his office or a digital version or whatever his method is of the 53. And it's a constant moving on, off, maybe sometimes there's 53 guys up there. Sometimes there's 55 and they'll have to make a real last minute decision. Maybe they just look at it and there's there ain't no way we're keeping 6 receivers anyway. Like we have our 5, we know who they are. Last guy that I'll ask you about real quick at that position though is Gallup. Had a couple of catches,
yeah,
okay, that's good. But do you feel like he has done enough that, or is there just, I just don't know what to do with him, I guess is clearly considering I just ran out of words.
I think the thing with him is he has the most experience of the group, or close to the most experience. He's got vertical playmaking ability and he's done it at a high level. I think coming out of the game, I don't know, disappointed is not the right word, but he made a couple plays on the football, but there's also a deep ball where he's getting a little bit tied up, and instead of fighting through the contact and giving himself a shot at the football, he kind of throttles it down. There was a couple of those where he didn't finish the play kind of.
Yeah.
And I think that stuff is stuff that he's done in camp a little bit too. So it's where's his health at? Where's his mindset at? How's he feeling? And I'm not sure he's distanced himself from anybody else on the roster necessarily. It's crazy. It's you get out. I'm not kidding. You get out of the Debo, you get out of the Zach Ertzes, you get out of, I can't even think. Jalen Lane's had a pretty solid performance. Like I said, he had a good game, but you get out of that group and it's somebody, and I said this on the broadcast, somebody just needs to come out and make some plays and you're going to be on the team. And no one's really done that yet. And I think that's the thing that's been, frustrating and disappointing. We talked about Strawn, in practice the other day, he made a beautiful catch on a contested slant. You got to do some of that stuff in preseason and give and kind of justify your roster spot if that's the way the team wants to go.
Yeah. By the way, Strawn, what we had previously been saying is Strachan. That's how it's spelled. Apologies to Michael for not knowing the pronunciation up to this point. But
Bram
if you hear Strawn,
Bram hooked it up with the pronunciation guide. So
there you go. Thanks, Bram. Appreciate you. All right. You know what I do know how to say, Logan? Bill.
Yeah.
Bill was good. Obviously left with a concussion. Hope that's just a minor thing, and then he's perfectly okay and is back in the whole deal very quickly. But man, you see it. You see how squirmy he is. You see how he finishes runs. I mean, it was this. I think it was his first one. It should have been a -5. He gets back to the line of scrimmage, and you're like, hell yeah, it's 2nd and 10. He is. There's something there, and we saw it in a real football game for the first time.
Yeah, I do think there's something there. And again, there's some youth to how he runs a little, you know what I mean? There's some stuff you get away with in college you can't get away with in NFL games. But I do think he did a great job maximizing runs. Pass protection was a little up and down. I think, kind of the reverse of that is Chris Rodriguez had a great day, physical day in pass protection. It was funny, watching their runs back to back, watching Bill's runs, very good, very productive, maximizing runs. And you watch Sherrod, and it's they've got these kind of, pre-snap run looks where if the nickel's in the overhang, you're going to throw the bubble, and he's running into an unblocked nickel, or he's running into an unblocked defensive end. And you're just man, that's a bummer that he didn't get to maximize. Chris Rodriguez didn't get to maximize his looks, but we're talking about Bill. I think Bill, was as advertised. I think there's a little bit of reeling in that crazy horse, getting to be a little bit more patient, but I think you see the athlete, and I think you see the vision. I think you see the movement skills. So hopefully he's healthy, and hopefully he continues to grow as we move into the rest of the preseason.
For sure. All right. You talked a little bit about C-Rod. Anything else from him or any of the other backs that you think is worth noting?
Yeah, I think C-Rod's running with good power. I just want to see him get some clean runs. You know what I mean? I was watching the Jets game the other day, and their big back is Allen. He's from Wisconsin.
Braylon Allen.
Yeah. And just getting him through that first line. I want to see what he can do, because again, he was in a tough spot with some of those. I thought Jeremy McNichols had a really good day. Just a violent, physical, tough dude. Felton, I think he had 3 or 4 carries. I thought was okay. And then Kaz Allen, I was kind of hoping to get to see him play some more running back, but gets nicked and doesn't get a lot of touches there. So the running back room kind of ended up being a little different than we thought in our preview show, where it's like the guys we thought were going to be good that have played a lot of football were good, and the other guys didn't really have time or an opportunity to assert themselves.
All right, so that leaves tight ends and O-line. Sinnott, he was like, here's what I would say about Ben Sinnott. You felt Ben Sinnott's presence. Like he was there, and that's one of the things we asked for. Like he was involved. He had a couple of looks. We mentioned the drop earlier. That's like not a great ball, whether that is just a bad ball in general by Sam, whether Ben didn't finish the route correctly, whether he should have just caught it anyway. Like that can be debated. And I think if you're a coach, you're telling the quarterback to figure it out. You're telling the tight end to figure it out.
Yeah.
But he does make a couple catches. How did he look overall, run game added in as well, when you look at his blocking and the day that 82 had?
I thought he looked pretty solid. I think the thing with the run game specifically is like there's a couple plays where like, what's your angle? Like, what's your landmark on this guy? You're running with great energy. You're attacking with great physicality, but where's the ball going? If the ball's going outside and my hat needs to be outside. I still need to be physical, but I need to be physical with the correct approach and landmark. I thought the routes looked good. Like that spin route that he ran, I call it spin, like second in is the acronym that I remember from Kyle's offense I thought was great. It reminded me a little bit of Zach. I love how he got up to the top, inside stem, push vertical, really quick 1-2 speed cut. I thought that was big time to see that skill set from him. And again, that was the one where they're not quite on the same page, the quarterback, Sam and him, but that movement skill was good. Made some nice like catches on the out. That was a tough catch kind of on the back shoulder there on the stick on the Patriot concept. So overall, I thought solid day. And again, like it's tough in these kind of games where the opportunities are limited. I know they ran 71 plays, but they weren't in the flow of an offense. It's like, here's a 3 and out, here's a 4 and out, here's a 5 and out, here's a 3 and out. And it's just, you never get any rhythm as a play caller or a player. So given that context, I think he had a pretty solid day. I just want to see him play more and get more consistent. Like go on a 8-play drive. How does he look in that, right? I don't want to see like, here's one play, go to the bench. Because I know as a player, that's really hard to do. That's really hard to be successful in those situations because you don't get in a rhythm. But overall, good. Thought Yankoff had a pretty solid day with some of the route running stuff. Cole Turner as the Y, I thought, on Bill's first long run, did a great job on the end. Then there's some other stuff where he's getting thrown off. But I thought the urgency was there. Makes that kind of tough contested catch, quote unquote, on the corner where he's diving for the ball. Love the ball skills. And then Cager's movement skills are crazy. It's
Dude, that one, what was it, a corner route where he just explodes and you're like, whoa, holy smokes.
He definitely has that. And so that group is interesting, but I think so I feel a little bit more optimistic about that group as opposed to the receivers. But I just want to see them play. I don't want to see 3 plays here, 2 plays here, 1 play there. I want to see them play a little bit more. And so hopefully in the second half of this Bengals game, we get to see that.
For sure. All right. And last but not least, offensive line. Obviously, a lot of guys don't play. We did get to see Connerly play, and you think he played all right from what I could tell watching on the broadcast. So after taking a look at some of the All-22 and everything else that you've watched, taking in really was a good week for him in New England because he performed well by all accounts in the joint practice as well. What do you make of the first-round pick and the rest of the O-line?
Yeah, I thought he looked good, man. He did some stuff that was like really impressive. Like there's certain things that like top athlete tackles do in terms of movement skills. Like one of the first run plays it was like an outside zone to his side. And so he's got to kind of run, check the tight end, and then push vertical to the linebacker. And I swear he like was shot out of a cannon, managed to get a hand on, which is really tough to do, especially when that defensive end is outside the tight end. So great job on that. And I thought he overran it, but his ability to snap the brakes down, get up and block the linebacker was just impressive. He had a couple really nice fluid depth kind of kick sets on his pass sets. He did some great stuff in the run game. Just his ability to get to spots and punch hips and cut people off. Like you see the athleticism. Obviously, it's not a perfect game. There's a couple like where he's a little tight on the line or he oversets. Like there was a stunt where he kind of jump sets the stunt, which is fine. But, with a 3 technique on third down, you probably want to think more of a vertical set there. He gets picked off, is able to recover. But I think that's more youth. That's not necessarily like a physical loss. I think there's some stuff with his hands, getting his hands a little bit tighter in pass pro is going to be a huge thing for him moving forward. But it was great to see him understand the pass protection line a little bit better than he had early in camp, and the run game stuff. Like I'm going to try and get a breakdown together for it because I thought it was really, really sharp in terms of like really big time in terms of what he was able to do. And I think that speaks to kind of the whole O-line. I thought 75, Chris Paul, had a really good day. Like you just feel him. You feel his strength. You feel his power. I think he's matured a lot in terms of understanding pass protection. 51 Hunt, I thought, had a pretty solid day when he came in to tackle. It's not perfect. He's playing against the threes. He's a 10-year vet. It should look a certain way, but I thought that was pretty solid. And then Dieter, when Dieter came in and played guard, I was actually relatively impressed. Like, it wasn't perfect by any stretch, but those were the kind of the 4 dudes on the offensive line that I thought deserved a shout out. But for sure, 75 is probably the first guy. He had a really solid game, I thought, just physical game, powerful game. And then I thought 72, and then Dieter and 51, obviously, were the other guys.
Yeah, Dieter having a good camp is important because he hung on for dear life last year. And obviously we've talked about Nick Allegretti's ability to play guard and center inside could put Dieter's roster spot at risk. So a guy who's played a lot of football, I think, brings the right like attitude and level of nasty and all that kind of stuff. But he's definitely going to be one of those last guys in, first guys out type of thing. So good to see him have a good day. All right, that's the offense. Hopefully we'll see some of the starters against Cincinnati. We know we'll see some of Cincinnati's starters on Monday Night Football, but we will talk about that later. But let's wrap up week 1 of the preseason talking about the defense. Take command. I'm Craig Hoffman. He is Logan Paulsen. Defense. Let's talk about it, Logan. D-line to get started. Obviously, huge positive. Maybe the brightest spot of the game. Johnny Newton getting the sack fumble. We absolutely love that. But overall, this defensive line, not a lot of dudes that are going to be on the team played. I will say Cleveland Furrow being out there didn't have the greatest day in terms of some of the stuff, but you talked about some of the context around that earlier. Some of those edge runs game planned up in a way that typically just don't see in the preseason. Thanks, Vrabel. Really appreciate that. But what do you make of how the D-line got after it on Friday night?
Yeah, and real quick, I just want to give Trent Scott a shout out too. I thought he did a really good job playing offensive line, just to kind of throw him out there. I forgot to mention him. But for the defensive line, it was kind of an interesting watch, because I think guys that I thought would play well just kind of played okay, and guys that I didn't have high expectations for played better. So I actually thought Carl Davis and Sheldon Day did a pretty good job. And now they're working against the 2s and the 3s, but I think Big Carl had a nice day, batting some passes down, sitting double teams. Sheldon Day, man, that guy just is a ball player, just a ball player. And so love to see that from those 2 guys. I thought Eddie Goldman at times flashed, but again, there's some times where not quite what I was expecting in terms of what I saw from him in Atlanta last year. Kershaw Newton, you mentioned him. I think there's times where you could feel him a little bit more. There's still times like on first and second down where it's like, hey, can we sit that double team a little bit better? Can we be a little quicker with our hands? Can we work our get off a little bit more? But then you see him on the sack fumble where that's an ET, like where the end picks for him, and his ability to turn and bend that corner. I think that's pretty high level. Him sniffing out that screen, I thought he did a great job of that. So are there areas to improve? Yeah, but in terms of flash and spark, I think you feel pretty good about him. But overall, I mean, they were kind of okay. You know what I mean? No one really separated themselves, especially on the edge. None of those guys really stood out. I thought Holmes had a solid day, but again, he didn't play a ton. I thought Jones had a decent day, but there was some times where he's out of position, not in the right spot, but he plays hard. So you feel that energy, which is kind of cool. But overall, it kind of a little disappointing, I think, with some of the guys I thought would have big days, but there were some bright spots for sure.
All right, let's talk about Dominique Hampton. Obviously, he did not have a good day.
Yes.
That is how he has now been released. And there's probably on the kind of bigger picture side of this, right? Like, you have to give credit to Adam Peters for not saying like, I just refuse to cut a guy who's not making it, not cutting it. Trying to think of a different word that way. I'm not saying cut twice, but I'm not going to not release a guy for a guy who's not cutting it. Right. I'm not going to hold on for my pride to a draft pick that is not playing well enough to be on the team. And he just had a really bad day. I think it's really tough to tell a guy like, hey, we're going to redshirt you the whole year. We're going to change your position. And after one preseason game in year 2, bang, like that's got to be an excruciating decision to make if you're Adam. So based off the tape, Logan, I guess, like, what did they see where they felt like that, like this just not only didn't work, but it's not going to work? Like, what did he struggle with?
Yeah, I think when you look at the Dolphins game, the Miami game last year, you saw a guy that could run, could cover space, again, like was okay taking on blocks, but really understood coverage principles well and looked very confident. And here, I don't know if it's because the run philosophy was a little bit different, but man, he had a really hard time fitting runs. He had a really hard time being decisive downhill. He had a really hard time taking on blocks. Like there were multiple times where he just couldn't disengage from the offensive lineman and he ends up on the ground. You know what I mean? Like I'm talking maybe close to 8 or 9 times in this game. Like just had a really like rough outing. I think some of the athleticism that he showed last year seems to have waned. I know he's been negotiating a back injury since college. There are times where you see him kind of try to run. And he just looks incredibly stiff and tight in his back. And so I was always a big fan of him. I thought he had a pretty good spring, actually. Remember we talked about that?
Yeah.
And here in this game, like he just looked unfortunately out of his depth, which is really hard to say because, this is a guy, like you said, who's committed a lot to this organization, made the position switch, I thought had a very high ceiling. And again, in this game just came out and didn't live up to the billing, which is really hard to watch, when you're kind of saying, oh, maybe the next play will be better, or maybe the next play will be better. And there wasn't anything like, as a point of comparison, because Kane played pretty much the whole game, 56.
Yeah.
Kane's not always doing the right thing. He's not. And you can feel that. But there is an energy and a violence to the way, like, so for example, they ran that toss crack play in the red zone. They ran it to the right first. And the receiver comes to crack him and he demolishes the receiver, knocks him on his butt and like dives over and tries to make the tackle. He's shooting the gap. He's on the blitzes. He's giving it, kind of the 1-2. He's getting some pressures. And so you could feel that athleticism. You could feel that energy. And I think like, man, like that's a dude whose arrow is pointing up, even though I'm not sure everything's right all the time. You know what I mean? With Dominique, it was kind of the opposite. It was like you never felt him. And again, like that's disappointing because I thought that was going to be a pretty exciting addition to this team, but that's life, man. That's life in the NFL, and it's disappointing.
I also feel like they were probably looking at the reality of like, how do we get Hampton? Like, is there a future here for Medrano and Hampton?
Yeah.
And the answer was probably no. And it's like we like what we see from Kane enough that we're going to let go of the Hampton experiment. In a way, this is the nice thing to do. The earlier a guy gets cut, like the more quicker he can go find somewhere else and try to make, do what he can in practice this week and play in a second preseason game this weekend for another team. Like I hope that works out for Dominique Hampton. And I hope that it's someone that believes him in the way that Adam, did initially. Obviously that waned over time. But maybe someone who sees him as a safety is like, hey man, why don't you lose that 10 pounds back and we're going to put you back in the position that you grew up playing. Like who knows how it works out. Credit to Adam for not holding on for too long once he realized like what their vision was not going to work. But at the same time, that's obviously less than ideal for a 5th round pick just last year to be gone before his second season even begins. Anything else you want to say on Medrano? He's really the only other linebacker of super note. Based off where we are, they bring in Duke Riley, so we'll have more on him after we see him play a little bit. You did play with him in Atlanta, though, so another former Paulsen teammate and a guy that DQ knows a little bit.
Yeah.
But anything else from Medrano or the rest of the linebackers?
I thought Medrano had good. The energy was good. There's times where I'm like, man, are you supposed to fit over the top of this, or we should have done this, or maybe, but like. I thought his hands usage was great. I thought he got in on some tackles. There was one play late where he's trying to punch the ball out cracked on a screen where I'm like, just make that tackle. We don't need to be getting cute there. But again, like that's where you say the energy, the effort, allows you that you can coach that. You can coach that. Right. The other guy that I thought deserved a shout out was Kahe. I forgot how to say his name. Let me look it up real quick. It is Kaho, right, from UCLA. I thought there were times where he flashed a little bit, like taking on blocks. And again, he's not the athlete that Kane is, but I think as a linebacker, right, like that's someone that maybe give it a shot, see how it looks. And I think maybe you give him more opportunity. And then mentioning Duke Riley, like he's a guy that's played a ton of ball, special teams guy. And we talked about some of that inexperience with that third group in terms of teams, the depth on teams. He's the guy that comes in and solves that problem right away. So if Dominique isn't working out, this is a really smart move in my opinion, because you give those young linebackers someone to kind of model after, watch, but also a guy who's made his career. I think this is probably year 7 or 8 for him, just playing teams at a high level. So that, again, like there's no issue with that, the depth of that team's group. So
for sure. All right. Secondary wise, not the day that I think Tyler Owens was hoping for. Had, a couple of missed tackles, you feel the physicality, but also you got to finish. This is where it's not thud anymore. It's not like it's real football. And one of the things that we talked about before the game was like, how well are some of these guys going to tackle? Then you have Jeremy Reeves, who that guy knows how to tackle. I don't know what the hell he's supposed to do on that play that he gets flagged
it's a penalty,
for.
but it's tough.
It is, but I don't think it should be. Like the idea of why it is a penalty is smart. You're trying to protect guys' heads. It's only a penalty because the ball carrier dips his head.
Yeah.
Like Revo's head is headed to the side of the dude's hip. As the tackle is happening, the guy tries to shoulder him. They wind up making, more helmet contact. Like, what is he supposed to do? He targeted it correctly. I don't think he should be punished for that.
Yeah, I mean, he did target it correctly, but again, like that's the rule, like helmet-to-helmet contact, and he definitely initiated it. And again, like sometimes, like in order to give the refs a consistent aiming point, like these plays that are bang bang like that are penalties. Like I was talking to Fletch about, he's like, yeah, I'm a defensive guy through and through, but like unfortunately, the way the rule's written, that's a penalty. So I empathize with you. I empathize with Revo. Like I actually have him on my list as like one of the guys who just played out of his freaking mind, man. He had an awesome game. Physical, downhill, tough tackles, like aggressive to the ball. Like there was a draw in the low red when they were going, the Patriots had the ball going right to left. And he like kind of beat the receiver, kind of went inside the guard, probably misfitted a little bit, but gets his hand on the foot, tackles the guy. And I'm like, that's what you want to see from defenders, right? You mentioned Tyler Owens. I think he had a better game than I thought when I watched the film, but all the stuff you said about him is true. Like we got to finish some tackles. He had some stuff kind of in the muck and the mire. He had some good coverage stuff, but like you said, you come out of that saying like, man, we got to be a little bit more consistent than that for sure. But I think overall, when you watch down to down, you're like, actually, this is okay. You can be better for sure, but this is okay. And I think Noah Monogany played his absolute face off, man. He had an awesome game. The problem is he gave him that touchdown late. So I think a lot of people.
I just feel like some of the worst things that happened to them, he was in the frame, and sometimes that's just unfortunate. Like you're just there.
Yeah.
But like on the kickoff return, he's chasing down, and you're like,
I think he was the L1 or R1 on the side, so he's the safety, kind of fitting in there, and like that's to me unrealistic because, like you said. Yankoff's getting held. There's like 10 yards.
Yeah,
on this
the gap
side,
is enormous. You're just like, that's unfortunate. You're the guy in the picture getting run past. And then he gives up the touchdown. And I feel like there was one or two more where you're like, oh, man. But like, I think that's kind of the one, I'm glad that it actually was better than it felt.
Yeah,
that's good. I'm not trying to take away from that.
He covered competitively. And again, like you have one bad play to my eye, which again, like it's going to happen. But I thought overall he deserves a shout out.
To me, that's the Noah experience, though, and like why he's a great backup.
Sure.
The thing that's consistent with him is he's going to play his absolute face off.
Yeah.
He's always going to give you effort. He's going to play with physicality. It's just sometimes that's going to result in missed tackles or missed coverages or penalties. And you hope that because he's in a backup role that you can limit the exposure and he can be a really helpful piece for you. So that's kind of the Noah experience. So I'm glad that it was more true to the Noah experience than it felt with some of those big plays. Anybody else in the secondary, for better or for worse, that you want to shout out as we wrap up here?
Anybody in the secondary, better or worse? I think Carlin Vigors had a tough day. He had a really tough day tackling specifically. I thought the coverage was okay, but I think you see some of the stuff that made him a UDFA. Like there was never any doubt about his ability to cover. It's about his willingness to tackle. And I think you saw a little bit of difficulty there. I thought Ben Nickel, the number 48, the backup safety, had a pretty solid day. Like he took good angles, was good in coverage, decent on teams. Like, and again, I don't know what his ultimate ceiling is, probably a practice squad guy, but that's nice to see somebody late kind of making plays for himself. I'm trying to think who else is playing. Percy, I thought played really well, but he hurt himself early. And didn't play a lot. Ideal. So,
and then if you want to give star of the game, like Trey Amos.
Yeah, he
kid's
played really
awesome.
Well. Yeah, I mean, I forgot, but he was great. Like he tackled well. He made a great play on a toss crack. It was the same play that Kane knocked over the receiver. It wasn't the most physical play, but got the feet tangled up. And then in coverage, man, he just seems to get it. You know what I mean? Yeah. Whatever he's doing, the seatbelt, the lockdown,
like we can,
yeah. So he's doing a good job, and I want to see. And so for me, it was good to see. Really all your draft picks. Connerly played pretty good. Amos played well. I thought Jacoski Merritt had a good day. I thought Lane it wasn't in receiving, but like the special teams
overall,
was pretty solid. And then Kane, I thought, again, it wasn't perfect, but I thought you felt his juice. So I think overall,
you see why they drafted him.
Yeah. If you're looking for positives, I think those guys played well. And then like Revo, man, like that dude just played awesome. So
Revo forever. Revo forever. All right, that's our show then. We did it. We did a show. By the way, I guess we should. This technically goes in the special teams bucket, but Matt Gay, obviously the miss. That's not great. But the best kickers that are going to be available to replace him, if they need to go down that path eventually, are probably competing for spots on other rosters right now, which is something we learned last year the hard way. So while clearly Matt Gay needs to pick it back up, he was fine the first couple of weeks of camps, had a couple misses, and then or has the miss in the game. I would not freak out to think that they are ostriching with their head buried in the sand about that. And Dan Quinn even acknowledged, like, hey, after your guy misses, like, it's a fair question to ask. But they gave him a lot of money. They want him to be the guy. And unless he struggles the rest of camp, they're probably not going to bring anyone in. I'm sure they have a list of options, but that anything else you want to add on the kicker situation? Or does that cover it?
No, I think you hit that perfectly.
Yeah, they have enough other things going on that they can use the roster spots for something else, despite the fact that I have an annual plea that Tressway should not have to kick in the preseason, should not have to punt. They should always just sign a punter for the game and be like, hey, man, boot it down there. But that's a thing for another day or perhaps another year. All right, that's Logan Paulsen. I'm Craig Hoffman. We'll see you later this week with more from practice and the Bengals preview and maybe some more. So that's Logan. I'm Craig. See you next time on Take Command.